So what have we got here? This is 10 to 11 local time in London and 10:50 hours GMT in London, from London on Thursday, the 1st of July 2021. And this is part A of the world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street. By Fleet Street is, of course, we mean this one. And this is not Fleet Street, but this is something that we are doing for evidence purposes, which we shall come to during the discussion. This is Fleet Street in the sense that it's a kind of peripheral. It's a weekly title published for the last 5 years since the Brexit referendum. And the publishers of this particular title, weekly title, claim that they support the UK remaining in the European Union. But as the writers, contributors, are either recent Fleet Street employees or writers or byline holders, this new European claim is not justified because, contrary to the suggestion that because they support the UK remaining in the EU, therefore they are morally or ethically better than the rest of the Fleet Street that actually supported the European departure from the UK's departure from the EU. Now, the Financial Times, which has got the cover price of £2.90. So wherever you are watching, you convert that £2.90, 2.90 into your local currency. And if it is in the subcontinent, say Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan, it would be around 100 units of the local taka or rupee or rupiah, whatever. And the Financial Times, we have renamed it Financial Crimes, and we shall update on the reason for renaming it Financial Crimes. Now, this is a heading on the front page of The Guardian, which says fears over mass events. After 1,300 people traveling, Scotland fans get COVID. Will the Euros be eat out to help out on steroids? By opening games to 60,000 fans, they send a message. The danger has gone. That is by SAGE subcommittee member, Professor Stephen Reicher, or Reicher. And there is a piece also on the Guardian front pages. GPs are giving out second jabs, that is the second vaccine, after only 3 weeks. Now, this is a proof. This item is a proof, well, as well as the first one, fears over mass events after 1,300 traveling Scotland fans get COVID. And what this is continuing This is the continuing evidence that the UK hasn't really solved the problem of the COVID-19. And all over 50s to get COVID and flu jab in each arm. So they are complicating they have complicated the contradictory, already complex, complicated medical treatment, so-called. And there are more allegations against the so-called health secretary, Matt Hancock. And there is absolutely unjustified propaganda for the ending of the lockdown in the Times. And the phrase jaw-dropping is being used by the Times after the Guardian used the phrase jaw-dropping about the related issue yesterday. And we shall come to both issues and both titles' use of the phrase jaw-dropping. And I've got a piece in the Times about a murderer, mass murderer of cats in Brighton. And it's a Peter Chappell byline piece on 5 columns. Across 5 columns says, Steve Booker, 54, stabbed at least 16 pet cats and possibly many more. So this criminal mass murdered cats in the Brighton area. Well, we got this local paper, The Guardian, again this week. And this one is about the police releasing the pictures of two women, apparently young women, who attacked two women on the tube between Leighton and Leytonstone stations on the Central Line in East London. And the reason we bought this one is for this item, and also for the item headlined "Council Failed Young Man for Most of His Life." Now that is a headline that could apply to almost every single council. And there is this piece about a man named Arsian. Is it Arsian or Arslan Ahmad? Has been linked with 3 stabbings. So Arslan is the spelling in the main copy. So we'll come to that after taking a look at this one. The council has failed young man for most of his life, and the family in constant battle for specialist care. And this is the picture of a young, that is when he was infant, the young person who has been the subject of council failures. Alex is a young boy. Now this item by byline to Victoria Munro, it says annual reviews of the health and education support for children with special needs are a legal requirement and are supposed to be the only time when changes to the care are made. So the headline is "The council has failed young man for most of his life," and then the subheading is "Family in constant battle for specialist care." Now, this is the piece. This is the piece. Now, the reason why we are looking at that piece is, of course, for the obvious reason about the council failing, but is also to highlight the need for the Tower Hamlets Council to be held to account significantly, materially, for neglecting their safeguarding children duties to the 4 girls from the Bethnal Green School, including Shamima Begum. The first one that left the UK and went to Syria as a child was Sharmina Begum. And the other 3 were Shamima Begum, Amira Abbasi, and Khadija Sultana. Now, Abbasi, in the published records, is wrongly spelled. It is spelled like Abbas, which is completely due to the ignorance of the people. who made the decision for registering or spelling a name. Abbasi is a name. A base is not a name, it's an action. Now, on this same page, there is the smallest of the three items on this page 7 of the Guardian series, .co.uk, dated the 1st of July, which is today, 2021, has got a misleading heading: Mayor slammed over University of over ULEZ. It's not university, it's about ultra low emission zone. Now it says Sadiq Khan has been accused of patronizing Londoners and being out of touch after suggesting people could buy a second-hand car to avoid the ULEZ charge. And the news item is based on a statement made by Suzanne Hall, leader of the Conservatives at the London Assembly. I mean, it is impossible, absolutely, factually, evidentially impossible to come across any statement or comment about Sadiq Khan's unfitness that can be traced to the Labour Party members of the London Assembly. So the Financial Times today is still denying the India variant. And this item by Robert Shrimsley says Matt Hancock's fall will have lasting consequences. Before going through the kind of details of these papers today, let me say again, the reason I call it this exercise of going through the contents, the agenda, the purpose, and the corruption, the criminality, and the racism, and the ignorance is summed up in what I've just said. Fleet Street is not carrying news of substance that actually has impact on the lives of people, most certainly not the lives of the many. Most emphatically, not the lives of the many. So what is the mystery behind the continuing kind of business that these titles represent and embody? That is one of the most urgent issues. Those people who buy them, what do they buy them for? This is a paper for the Hebs, and it's a one-tone brazen two fingers to the people who haven't got the money. And people who are in poverty are not there because of choice, by choice. People are pushed into poverty by people who make decisions about their lives, their livelihoods, and so on. And the newspapers are not serving the needs of the people who are being robbed, looted, denied, deprived, lied to, and lied about. And is Haldane leaving the Bank of England? Now, this Haldane is comparable to a narcissist seeking headlines. Because Haldane, whatever reason, has kind of grabbed the headlines almost continuously for the last 2 months at least. Now, Haldane was chief economist, but he didn't do that until about the last 2 months. Why? And they've got 3 small businesses promoted by the financial crimes under the heading "Teething problems for post-Brexit trading become permanent reality." And the biggest image they have is of an Indian woman, Kiran Todi. Now, Todi is subject to investigation. And she is described as of Hampstead Tea, has set up a sister company in the Netherlands to enable European Union distribution of her Hampstead tea. We shall come to that later. Buyers rushed to complete sales before end of tax holiday that helped drive house price rise. This is again a criminal, corrupt promotion of the mystery of house prices. This is the financial crimes is the nearest daily kind of embodiment of capitalist lying and corruption and denials. The financial crimes has got the appearance of running news. Every item is a kind of cover-up. And the cover-up is the most, the cover-ups cover every item, let's say. But the cover-ups become most intense in the lying that the financial crimes perpetrates about issues of society and social care and the impact on the many of the grabbing of the wealth and resources by the few. I mean, instead of calling it kind of rape and sexism, they're running this piece under mining, under the topic of mining. And the heading is Lawyer Denies ENRC Rape Mode Remark. It's a Kazakh group tells court that corruption probe was expanded to rack up fees. This is a piece byline to Kate Beoley. Now, the cover-up, the suppression of the identity is here evident as well. It's a city lawyer. There is no such thing as city lawyer. It's a capitalist based in the notional area covered by the City of London, but they don't mention City of London in there. They leave out the reference to the City of London as the location of the criminals' operations and activities. So, having given that clarification, let's read the rest of it in the kind of first few paragraphs. They say city lawyer Neil Gerard has denied having said he was in rape mode at his former client, the mining company ENRC, during his third day of witness testimony in a blockbuster civil trial. That is the first paragraph. Byline to Kate Beoley on page 12 of the Financial Times today. So we read that again after that extra clarification. City lawyer Neil Gerard has denied having said he was in rape mode and planned to screw those fuckers at his former client, the mining company ENRC, during his third day of witness testimony in a blockbuster civil trial. Kazakh miner ENRC is suing Gerard and Descartes, the law firm that employed him, for allegedly expanding an investigation that Gerard was hired to conduct in 2010. Now, this is 11 years ago. So you can see the kind of corruption in the legal system, so-called. 11 years ago this happened, and they only started testimony third day. So reading that paragraph again, Kazakh miner ENRC is suing Gerard and Descartes, or Deschart. Looks like a German name, but we can check that. The law firm that employed him for allegedly expanding an investigation that Gerard was hired to conduct in 2010 in order to generate millions of pounds in extra fees. Look, this is about robbery, robbing millions of pounds by the companies. It's not serving the needs or the rights of the many. It's gangs of companies and lawyers embarked on thieving and robbing and looting millions and millions of pounds under various pretexts. The company is alleging breaches of contract and fiduciary duty and is also suing the UK's Serious Fraud Office for £70 million in the same case. ENRC claims Gerard wrongfully expanded a probe of allegations of corruption in Kazakhstan and Africa and worked with the SFO, Serious Fraud Office in the UK, to bring about an official criminal inquiry in spite of a lack of evidence. It has accused the agency of misfeasance in public office, claims that SFO denies. ENRC originally hired Gerard to investigate an anonymous whistleblower's allegations relating to one of its mines. It fired him from the job in 2013. The Serious Fraud Office has been investigating ENRC since 2013 over allegations of fraud, bribery, and corruption around the acquisition of substantial mineral assets. It continues to weigh whether to bring any criminal charges. Now that is 10 years ago, 11 years ago, 8 years ago, quite a long number of years ago. Why am I mentioning that? Because the crooks imposed in the London Borough of Tower Hamlets Council, corrupt councils, so-called legal section, have been using the phrase historic claims when denying wrongdoings and failing to compensate and pay damages and costs to the claimants that are collectively members of the movement defending the community in the East End of London. And the Queen's Bench division in the High Court has continued to lie, or the personnel employed in the Queen's Bench division have continued to lie. Now, this is a claim they're referring to here in the Financial Crimes Today. The maximum amount they're claiming there is 70 million, 7 million pounds. But the claims that we are referring to, and claims that are based on the criminality perpetrated by the London Borough of Tower Hamlets crooks, exceeds that sum 100 times and beyond. So when David Neuberger, at the time the outgoing president of the Supreme Court, spewed in January or in July 2017, that Brexit would bring, one of the benefits that Brexit would bring would be to make London the center of the world's claims. He meant claims in large sums, claims of large sums of damages and compensations that is comparable to this one. So they're saying, the Financial Crimes is saying about Gerard, the lawyer who said that he was in a rape mode and he was going to rape them. Yesterday, Gerard denied he met two consultants involved with the probe, that is the investigation, at a Sloane Square restaurant and told them he was in rape mode in pursuit of fees from the ENRC. He is accused of having rubbed his hands together after reading allegations about the company printed in the Times newspaper. Now, we'll come to Sloane Square in a minute. To those who are watching this, they need to know to what extent I am familiar with Sloane Square. I'm familiar with Sloane Square, not contemporary in a contemporary mode, but in a historic mode empirically. Now, Gerard called the allegations utterly ridiculous, and there is certainly no way that I'm going to talk to a relative stranger and say to him that I'm in a rape mode. He added he had never said ever to anyone that I was in a rape mode or that I was going to screw anyone. Now, to those who are not familiar with the colloquial English, screw is to have sex with someone, and screw in this context is being used as a rape. ENRC said Gerard was under pressure to justify his £3 million a year pay at Deshart. The company claims he was reliant on ENRC for the bulk of his legal fees, and he therefore needed to turn a small job into a much larger one. Now, that is absolutely true, factual. Not necessarily in this case, but that is what happens. And that is one of the reasons why we call them licensed law traders, either licensed barristers or licensed solicitors, licensed to lie under the cover of the license that they are lawyers, licensed to practice law. What in fact happens is that they abuse the license to tell lies and make the lies look legitimate because they have got the license. So when we say about the liar, privatized editor, Ian Pissoff, never publishing the truth about what lawyers get up to, how licensed law traders steal money, and how licensed law trade is actually a business under license to allow crooks and criminals to generate money under the license. So that therefore license is the license to steal and rob and lie. Because the license to licensed law traders is the core of the corrupt trade. It's a law trade, trading at law, not upholding the principles of law, but misusing and abusing that license to cheat, overcharge, and invent a scenario whereby they can drag on and thus generate income. As I have said about Harry Mundy, the crooked employee employed by the then solicitors firm off Oxford Street called Garston's. The ghastly Garston's near Oxford Street, near Tottenham Court Road. Garston's was the crooked firm of solicitors that was foisted on our family in the beginning of the 1970s. The ghastly Garstons were foisted on the family by a court, where an order was made about an application by the then Hamlets Council about the state of the building in New Road. And they made the residents responsible for the state of the building in New Road, whereas the responsibility should have been placed on the shoulders of the then freeholders, the legal freeholders. But quite apart from that, Harry Mundy lied over at least 2 years. Harry Mundy at the ghastly Garstons kept lying and kept repeating the same routine every time there was an appointment for the family to attend a meeting at the ghastly Garstons during the 1970s, early 70s. And every time it was me who spoke to the liar, Harry Mundy, every time. And the liar kept lying because he asked me the same questions over 2 years about the same facts. And I gave him the same answers because the facts were absolutely the same facts. And 2 years later, the crooks at ghastly Garstons kept saying that our case against the Hamlets Council crooks was not substantiated. And I had said that there is absolutely no way that that was correct. So when there was a so-called conference with a barrister about the case, the barrister instantly agreed with me about my rejection of the ghastly Garstons claim. Ghastly Garston said that our case, our response, our replies, and our grounds against the Hamlets Council did not constitute a strong enough rejection of the council's claim. But it did. Absolutely 100%. And I had to comply with the criminal, ghastly Harry Mundy for the sake of the family, the rest of the family. Because my family thought that I knew less law than Harry Mundy, but Harry Mundy was a crook. He knew no law. I knew better laws than all of them put together in that stupid firm. But in order to placate other members of the family, and they say for the sake of my mother, because my mother would be the person who would be put under pressure for taking my side and saying that I was right. So this was absolutely an unbearably wrong situation that I had to put up with for the sake of my mother. So Harry Mundy made up. But the same thing, he was a very stupid man, and he recorded his questions and answers. He was like a dictation machine. But they were absolutely the same, substantially the same questions this liar put to me. Now, remember what I'm saying there. That is in the 1970s. And that is, I've given name, chapter, and verse. Anyone watching this, and anyone watching this on behalf of or from the London Borough of Tower Hamlets crooks, tell me otherwise, you criminals. Because Tower Hamlets Council criminals, crooks in the so-called crooked legal section, are absolute pathetic liars. And these liars have been lying for years. Now, if somebody asks me how many cases I have actually defended and how many cases I have won, do you recognize yourself asking me that question? I have dealt with, advocated, and won literally dozens of cases concerning my own experience. Are you satisfied? If you are not, listen on. Because what happens in the courts at every level in this country? The lie, they tell lies and they fabricate. There is no reference to the kind of textbook contents of the law. The references are absent from the utterances of judges, as well as from the utterances and the memos and the notes that travel between the various non-licensed law trading staff, the admin staff. Most of the admin staff installed in courts of law, so-called, are ignorant, ill-read, ill-educated, and ill-willed. They're dishonest, and they couldn't care less about the impact of their lying and dishonesty and their ignorance that have an impact, affect the parties concerned, especially at the receiving end of the lies, the idiocies, the ignorance, the denials, the pretense by these so-called administrative staff. And the complete and utter insulting indifference exhibited by most of the so-called judges. Anyone who can say that they can do a review of Fleet Street in a few minutes, of course, they are not telling the truth. Because this item alone is taking this much time, and the clarity, the requirements, the demand for clarity, evidence, and transparency, these require me to go through the evidence that I have just done. I've given name of the criminal in employment at the ghastly Garstons, the corrupt solicitors, the racist solicitors. I haven't said what happened at the end of the kind of imposed engagement with these crooks over the civil action taken, planning law action, environmental law action taken against the family by the criminals in post at the time in the early 1970s in the London Borough of Crooked Council, Tower Hamlets. They lost the case, of course. And this is solely due to my work. To such an extent that the main employee, Peter Kemp, the racist criminal, Peter Kemp, burst out crying, weeping in the court. So that goes back to 1970s. To the question, I wanted to know the question, answer to the question whether I have won any case. I mean, how dare you? How dare you even think of asking me that question after the years I spent showing you the light out of the darkness that you were in? This is strictly evidential, strictly factual, and strictly about bad manners. You cannot find a single individual anywhere on this face of this planet who has given you the service, the enlightenment, the education that I have done. So going back to this question about this city lawyer Gerard, Neil Gerard, boasting that he was in a rape mode and he was going to rape some of these fuckers, as he called them. And I'm speaking strictly, factually, evidentially. Now, ENRC, who is suing this Neil Gerard, ENRC, the Kazakh company, said, and I'm repeating that statement that they've made in the piece in the Financial Times, as reported by this girl, Kate Biaioli, however she pronounces it. So the ENRC said Gerard was under pressure to justify his $3 million a year pay at Dashart. The company claims he was reliant on ENRC for the bulk of his legal fees. Now that is the corruptly claimed fees. And the corruption enabled by the existence, presumably, of a license to trade as a lawyer. So they are saying that the company claims he was reliant on ENRC for the bulk of his legal fees, and that he therefore needed to turn a small job into a much larger one. As I said, exactly as Harry Mundy did in his ghastly corrupt behavior at the Garston companies, solicitors, in the 1970s. Now, I have met, or I have had the misfortune, if you like, of having to put up with meetings with licensed law trading barristers, licensed law trading solicitors, licensed law trading legal executives. And I can say that in common with the licensed law traders sitting as judges, mostly in county courts, these so-called lawyers, licensed law trading barristers and solicitors and legal executives, are stupid. At a basic level, they are ignorant. And they are also, they aggravate their ignorance, their stupidity, their unfitness by their lack of attention. Now, the current statistics, official kind of numbers, averaging the various figures, show that there are about between 15 and 20 million people in poverty, in low income. Now, that is unacceptable. because poverty impacts on daily life, the quality of life, the everything. The basic needs are not met, nor can be met. So most of the causes of poverty that is being suffered collectively by these millions of people, 15 to 20 million or thereabouts, most of the causes of poverty are linkable, traceable to decisions other people make about these people. Of course, there is a core number, maybe 1 million or so, in the poverty group that cannot blame others because they are engaged in intentional crimes and criminality and illegality. So even if you leave those for moral and ethical reasons out of the group of people that are denied their rights, you have too many people in low income, in poor housing or no housing at all. Now, housing is correctly called a right, as a human right, because housing is absolutely essential for living the life, doing things that a human being needs to do. And this right, the right to housing, is covered by not one article, but several articles that are currently in existence and were drafted and enforced and ratified by various member states of the United Nations. And they're linked, directly linked with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that go with the founding of the United Nations. And they later became incorporated in the European Convention for Human Rights. And then all the member countries of the United Nations, almost all of them, signed those declarations and articles and statements. And then therefore they became obliged to carry out and uphold those rights. So housing rights is covered by not one, but many articles. So therefore, when the Town Hamlets Council took action against our family in the 1970s, alleging environmental kind of breaches, etc., they actually did that in breach of the obligations that they had to provide the support to ensure that our family and others affected, because it's a multi-story house, so these people were entitled to. Now, during the 2 years that I suffered the lying questions, unnecessary questions from the legal executive posing or equivalent Harry Mundy at the ghastly Garston solicitors company near Oxford Street, these criminals never asked me any questions about the international conventions, articles, and none of their so-called deposition allegedly on behalf of our claim against the council included any reference to the charters and the statements and the articles, which they should have mentioned. Not only mentioned, but they should have elaborated on. But in the 2 years of questioning that I put up with on behalf of this family, and just for the sake of my mother, because I didn't want my mother to be accused of allowing me to continue to reject the grounds that the solicitors were putting, because they were wrong. As I said, when we went to the conference with the so-called barrister, the barrister concerned immediately agreed with me and told this Harry Mandi, the moron, that he was wrong. And so we proceeded to the case, defending the case, and the Hamlets Council, crook Peter Kemp, K-E-M-P. It's a German spelling, just like Hitler's Mein Kampf. This crook, well, the word is, of course, struggle. So this Peter Kemp was in a struggle against our family, and he lost. And he broke out. He broke in tears in the court. Now, that was as early as the 1970s. So we have been defeating the liars in the Tower Hamlets Council for decades, for 5 decades at least. So this is Financial Times 50 years later, 50 years after we faced the Peter Kemp criminal and encouraged him to admit his idiocy and racism and stupidity, and he cried. After 3-4 years of confrontation with us, he cried in court. All due to me, my work. And the use of the phrase rape mode and screw those fuckers were made by Neil Gerard, in relation to his plan to force ENRC to give him 25 million pounds. So he created, according to the allegations, as heard in the court, he created an atmosphere of fear and intimidation on the part of the suers ENRC, so that they would be kind of persuaded under pressure to pay him millions of pounds. This is a case in the financial crimes, but it's not being reported in a contextual way. That is to say, they are not referring to various legal obligations that Neil Gerard and others are always under, according to their licensing authorities. So I said at the beginning that I will refer to Sloane Square and how I know Sloane Square. Now, Sloane Square is a part of London, West London, that is mainly populated by people, used by people, the shoppings and facilities there in SW3. The well-off people, the many who don't have much kind of connection with the Sloane Square. And it is an area which has got facilities for various kind of entertainment available to people with money. So it's not a place that reminds of a moral atmosphere. Sloane Square, when I visited Sloane Square socially, not at my initiative, but as part of a group of kind of academics that I was with, I didn't know what they were visiting. But it soon became clear that the pub that they were visiting, I'm talking about the 1970s, the pub that they were visiting had naked white women dancing in front of customers as part of the entertainment. Why am I saying that? Because of what this item is about. Because he said that he said that Gerard denied he met two consultants involved with the investigation at a Sloane Square restaurant. Now, that would be the kind of restaurant that the alleged meeting took place in. And as he was in that kind of restaurant, he most likely had told them he was in rape mode. Now, why would he talk about sex if he was having a business meeting? Because the atmosphere must have reminded him or prompted him of sex. And he's accused of having rubbed his hands together after reading allegations about the company printed in the Times newspaper at the time that they were referring to. And ENRC's barrister, Claire Montgomery QC said, you told the individuals the SFO, the Serious Fraud Office, was going to be in touch with ENRC, and you were in rape mode. Gerard pledged to screw those fuckers for about 25 millions. Now, given the rest of the story, the rest of the set of allegations, it is quite clear that this Neil Gerard might have said most of the things that he's been accused of. Whether the NRC case ends with an outcome that includes Gerard being found guilty is another matter. And we shall be continuing to look at the inadequacies of Fleet Street. journalism about the state of the courts. The reason why I'm saying that is linked to what I had said earlier, that it's not necessarily going to lead to Gerard being found guilty. Although David Neuberger boasted that Brexit would open up London as the center of the world's civil claims, if the claims include claims against somebody British like Neil Gerard, and the claimant being a foreign country like Kazakhstan, then it is not necessary that Gerard would be found guilty. Why am I saying that? Not because I want to say that, but the evidence, the facts say that. What David Neuberger was talking about when he was boasting that London would be the center of the world's litigants, he was making that on the assumption that the claimants and the defendants would be overwhelmingly, quote, foreigners, not British. Neuberger most certainly would not have given the scenario that included any significant number of British criminals and wrongdoers and thieves being found guilty of having stolen money from foreign claimants and so on. Remember what I'm saying. What I'm saying there is that Neuberger was lying as well. I've said that all along. And I've said that David Neuberger was lying because he was spewing pro-Brexiteering lies and overhyping the prospects of the British companies, British law traders and British courts benefiting in a big way from Brexit. So he was painting a picture showing that Brexit was going to deliver huge benefits. And he was saying, as the outgoing president of the Supreme Court, he was saying what he was saying based on the assumption that he knew what he was talking about in terms of London becoming the center of the world's litigants. And Neuberger therefore was talking about Brexiteering patriotism. He was saying that we would pocket the riches from the foreign fighters coming here to take advantage of our high-class service by the courts, on the condition that the service does not include finding British crooks and criminals guilty against foreign claimants. The whole ethos of Brexit is summed up in that boast that David Lidington had recruited David Neuberger to peddle. We shall move for the time being away from the legal corruption generally and the legal corruption as painted by the Kazakh claimants against this: City of London law trader Neil Gerard. Now, there is a piece in The Guardian today on page 15. This is a page 15 piece about the Batley and Spen by-election. And there are pictures of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The main picture has the faces of men. Whether any of them is Asian is not necessarily obvious from the photograph. The caption says, George Galloway gives a speech in the Market Square in Batley at an event also attended by the activist Lawrence Fox. And there is a picture of an elderly woman passing a spot where there are 3 banners or placards with Galloway's picture. So they say, a resident walks past banners promoting Galloway's candidacy in today's by-election, today being Thursday, the 1st of July 2021, when voters are apparently casting their votes as we speak. And they've quoted apparently a Muslim person called Farhan Khan, who is quoted as saying, if Galloway is going to go after the Muslim vote, what about the LGBTQIA Muslims? Should they feel safe? And there is a piece, this second piece on the same page, page 13, by Maya Ulf Robinson, North of England correspondent. And this piece is headed, Muslim women attack loud minority and community ahead of vote. What they're meaning in that headline is that ordinary Muslim women in the constituency of Batley and Spen are saying there are a small number of persons who are making loud noise in the name of the community. And they are attaching that loud minority with George Galloway. Now, as I've been saying in the last few broadcasts, and the response to that is the one that the Guardian piece ends with. It says, a reply also on WhatsApp. accuses the women of making unfounded claims and prejudice against men, adding, all is fair in love and war, and Laiba, that is Liebeur, sick, that is within quotation marks, six meaning exactly, for years have been fooling you with their deceit for decades. Now, the veteran campaigner accused of stoking division to win votes. That is a piece that is typical of the stupidity of the Fleet Street kind of commentators or Fleet Street papers and publications, both about Batley and Spen and about the rest of society. Because Galloway can never be rated as a winnable candidate at all. He didn't say he would win, and he could not win in that constituency, even without the kind of stoking of strife and hatred and intimidation that have been taking place in the last weeks. Galloway's purpose, as we have been saying on the facts, is to stop the Labour Party candidate. The Labour Party candidate being defeated as part of the Conservative strategy. The Conservatives have not got a good moral position. So in effect, the forces that support the Conservatives in this country have employed George Galloway. Whether they have given him any money or not is another matter. But they've employed, that is to say, they've engaged his services to appear in Batley and Spen as a parasite. Now, Galloway is a self-appointed parasite who parasites off politically exploitable Muslim parts of the electorate. So the Guardian is in denial of that, because the Guardian, like Galloway, is following an anti-Muslim, insulting to the Muslim narrative. There are as many kind of Muslims on the constituency electoral register as there are Hindus. But the Hindus are not the subject of any of these coverages or cover-ups or inventions. The Hindus are being left alone as far as the Fleet Street coverage and the mainstream media is concerned to do whatever they want to do. And they're not being accused of anything. So Galloway has actually placed himself as the self-appointed parasite in return for the approval of the Conservatives and the racists and the Brexiteers, which he very badly needs. As we have extensively covered Galloway's behavior, we don't have to repeat everything, but essentially the Guardian piece is ill-informed, ignorant, and racist and stupid, because any intelligent journalist would not ask the question about Galloway. They would run the story saying that Galloway is causing the problem. And they would never say to get votes. They would never ever say that Galloway is there, surfaced at today's by-election at Battalion to get votes. They would say that Galloway is bent on ruining quite a number of votes that would have gone to the candidate Kim Leadbeater. So Galloway is not there to win votes, but to make the Labour Party candidate lose votes that she would otherwise get. Not a simple statement to make. Galloway never went there to get votes. He was there to scare Muslim voters or mislead Muslim voters in the main from casting their votes for the candidature of Kim Leadbeater. He never went there to get votes. Win votes is a completely irresponsible and misleading piece by The Guardian. So this person that the Guardian is now describing as the North of England correspondent, Maya Wolf Robinson, is of African origin. Whether both of her parents are African or not, I have not yet fully checked, but she definitely has African origin. So she, the Maya Wolf Robinson, is being given this double-barrel name for a reason. I mean, it obviously initially deeply hides her African origin. I mean, double-barrel name is not part of the many. Most certainly not something that comes as part of the demography, natural demography of the African and Asian people. This is an imitation of the white star. And this Maya Wolf Robinson is not representative of the true demography in the ordinary population. And we shall come back to the whole role of the Fleet Street Papers about Battalion Span. And here we assert that this Maya Wolf Robinson is a mental stooge. She is not independent, and she most certainly is not against racists. She is a stooge, and regardless of what she has to say about George Galloway, makes not sense. Whatever she says about Galloway doesn't make any sense because her whole approach is based on dictation by the racists at The Guardian and elsewhere. Because she doesn't refer to Galloway in Tower Hamlets. This is a whole page given to Galloway, or supposedly given to discussing the facts about Galloway appearing in Battalion Span. Now, there is no way that Galloway can be described as having defeated the Labour Party twice in the past without referring to Tower Hamlets and Bradford West. The people. Bradford was only possible because of Tower Hamlets, because of Bethnal Green and Bow. George Galloway would never, ever come anywhere near getting the kind of election that he did in 2012. Had he not been allowed to become an MP again after 7 years of interruption or detour. Galloway is a racist boaster. But Galloway is allowed to boast as a racist at the expense of the Muslims because of the gullibility, indoctrination, brainwashing state of the Muslims. He parasites himself too. Any research, and the picture research about Galloway would show Galloway being surrounded by apparently excited supporters. Most of those excited supporters happened to be Muslims from mainly Pakistani background in the UK, with some Bangladeshis. It's a racist scenario. A white man, the only white man in all of the UK, who is prepared to kind of abuse his fans in that way. Galloway has never said one substantial thing in support of the Palestinian people that others have not said. Both the Palestinians and other supporters of the people of Palestine. So Galloway is not unique. And any so-called journalist doing a piece like the piece or pieces in the Guardian today would have done the research and summarize the long list of emptiness that actually constitute Galloway's claimed support for the Palestinian people. And the other thing I have said yesterday is that Galloway did a number of early demotions while he was an MP in the name of, at the expense of, Bethnal Green and Bow. And in none of those early demotions did he focus on the needs of the constituency. In fact, he messed up. They messed up the campaign that would have been successfully carried on behalf of the people who had been robbed by the crooks operating from an headquarter address at the complex of buildings called the London Muslim Centre. And the criminals and the crooks were operating a scam called Fast Solutions. So when the campaign began, this is the anniversary. It's July 2006. The First Solution crimes were highlighted on the 1st of July 2006, I think. The calendar year is subject to checking. Let's see if it was 2006 or 2007. It is not another year, either 2006 or 2007. So what she's doing, this double barrel name African origin person, is the type of things that ethnicity linked stooges do via the Fleet Street titles. She's in denial of racism, and she's in denial of the fact that Galloway is abusing his white skin. And he has done that many times in the past. And there is a piece in the journal of The Guardian, which is Opinion and Ideas, that is called. And it has got a piece written by Rana Mita. Now that sounds very much like the re-editing of an Indian name that we shall check on and update on in due course. And this is the Guardian, which is very much representative of the general approach to the world that is evident in the regimes of Narendra Modi and his predecessor parties and post holders. The Guardian is dedicated anti-Muslim outfit. And Martin Kettle, one of the racists who does the business as a liberal, and he wrote the factual thing about the riots, 1981 riots. So Kettle is not a straightforward racist, he's a crafty racist. And he's echoing our view. Not that he intends to echo our view, but that is what he's doing in this piece called A Devolution Reset is Needed to Save the United Kingdom. Remember, we use the quotation marks around UK. And the reason why we do that is because we believe that the UK is false. The UK is not fairly constituted or served. It's Little Englanders that dominate the rest of the UK. And the domination has gone past acceptable point of tolerance, which is why despite the limitations in their own programs, the SNP are getting more support for the cause of independence than they would have done otherwise. So that's what Martin Kettle is talking about. Now, in the piece, the front page here, the New European, as I said, New European is mainly written by people either already in Fleet Street or were previously employed by Fleet Street papers. One of the more widely known ones is Tim Walker, who worked for quite a long time for the Telegraph. And he has got So we shall be looking at the European and Mandrake in the next part. This is the end of the current part, part 2.